kick the field goal. It'll be Jason Chingel out of the hold of Mesco. Good snap, good hold, and the kick is blocked. Appalachian State has stunned the college football world. One of the greatest upsets in sports history.
Live from Chatterbox Sports Studios, it's Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman.
Come up today. We're thankful for that. We welcome you as always to Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. I'm Thom Brennaman. We come your way Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern time. You can follow us on YouTube/Chatterbox Sports. We always ask you, please subscribe to the program. We're also streaming on Facebook, Chatterbox Sports page there. If you'd like to join us in podcast form, by all means, just search Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman. And you're dialed in. I'm a little hoarse today. It's only two of us here today, Paul Fritzner, just you and me. The last men standing at Chatterbox Sports.
Tom, everything is looks like everything's firing on all cylinders here. So we're on and people can hear us. That was all I was worried about.
You're on your game, brother. You're on your game right from the get-go. Well, look, it's tough to swallow. There's no question about it. And it will be for quite some time. If someone would have told you that the Bengals would hold the Kansas City Chiefs to 20 points down to the final 5 seconds left in the game, and that Joe Burrow in the fourth quarter would have the football for 2 drives in a tie game, you'd say, where do I sign up, right? I mean, that means the Bengals win. But we know the answer is and was no. Twice in the final 8 minutes, Burrow had the chance and couldn't string together a drive that would lead to points to break the tie. You add in the Joseph Asai personal foul penalty on the final play from scrimmage, which of course led to the game-winning field goal, and the Kansas City Chiefs win the AFC Championship 23-20, the final. Look, whether you like the guy or you don't like the guy, it's irrelevant. Patrick Mahomes was unbelievable. 29 of 43, 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. He did fumble once, but no picks. The Chiefs as a team showed incredible grit and toughness. They lost 3 starting receivers during the course of the game to injuries, yet kept making plays when they had to make a play. Burrow, very pedestrian. 26 of 41, 271 touchdown, 2 picks. It's the first time, of course, in 4 tries that he loses to Mahomes. The offensive line early on was simply offensive. To be fair, they played with 3 new starters from just 3 weeks ago, but as good as they were against the Bills, they were that bad, especially in the first half yesterday. Burrow was sacked 5 times, 4 times in the first half, where, the pattern was there again. They fell behind 13-3. Last year was 21-3. The officiating was bad, plain and simple. We'll get into that. I'm not into all this conspiracy theory stuff, but the officiating was really bad. I mean, really bad. They just didn't seem to have their act together the whole game. So now it's time to start asking some critical questions about the franchise. Who leaves in the offseason? Which players? Any of the coaches? Will Burrow's contract hamstring this roster moving forward? And you have to ask the question, can Burrow win the big one? On the NFC side, it could not have gone worst for what was the hottest team in all of football, the 49ers. Winners of 12 straight, unbeaten with Brock Purdy at quarterback. But San Francisco suffered injury after injury, committed penalty after penalty in a humiliating 31-7 loss to Philadelphia. It started with Fred Warner on the second play of the game. Then Nick Bosa gets hurt. but the biggest blow was to Purdy's elbow in the opening half. They then had to hand the ball to the 14-year-old journeyman, the 14-year journeyman, Josh Johnson, and that was pretty much all she wrote. It got so bad that Johnson suffered a concussion. Purdy had to come back in the game, but he couldn't throw the ball. It was sad. So the stage is set for 57, Super Bowl 57 in Glendale, Arizona. That's 2 weeks from yesterday. For Kansas City, their third trip to the Super Bowl in the last 5 years, and it was 5 years ago that Philly beat Brady and the New England Patriots under Doug Peterson. Other NFL news, the purge continues in Dallas, where offensive coordinator Kellen Moore will not return. He is the seventh coach on the Cowboys staff to be let go since losing to the 49ers a week ago in the playoffs. Former Denver head coach Vic Fangio, is now the new defensive coordinator in Miami. The Bengals aren't the only local team to suffer defeats over the weekend. College basketball, you got to give it up to UC. Highly competitive. Played one of its best games of the year at number 3 Houston, but couldn't hold on to a double-digit lead in the second half, losing 75-69. The Bearcats play Wednesday night at home against Tulsa. And Xavier ran into the buzzsaw that is Creighton, losing 84-67. The Musketeers are in a 3-way tie atop the Big East with Marquette and Providence. The Friars come to the Cintas Center this Wednesday night. Kentucky lost to Kansas at Rupp Arena, 77-68. West Virginia and Huggy Bear got a huge win. Beat Auburn over the weekend. Auburn was ranked number 15. And 11-9 Oklahoma destroyed number 2 Alabama, 93-69. All right, we've got hundreds already in the chat. And look, there are all kinds of things to talk about. I want to go back, though, before the game ever started. We talked about it on this show. I thought the back and forth with the fans, some of the back and forth with the players was way out of line. It was just over the top. And then to add insult to injury, the mayor of Cincinnati and those comments he made last week. I mean, if you want to get into the whole good-natured ribbing with another mayor and all that kind of thing, that's been going on since the beginning of time in sports, right? I mean, it's fun stuff. You get behind your hometown team. But to bring in the whole officials want a paternity, I mean, come on. Come on. And it just, I don't know about you, but for me, Paul, I don't know if you felt the same way or whether you just took the whole thing tongue-in-cheek. When I was driving around on Friday and I heard those comments, I thought to myself, this just doesn't feel good at all.
I got to be honest, Tom. I may have been more upset at AFTAB than I was at anything that happened last night because it just seemed like a scapegoat. I was so frustrated going back and thinking about that because it's such an avoidable thing, right? If you're going to trash talk, if you're going to do that from your position like that, at least be good at it. But I couldn't even make it through that entire video. It was so cringeworthy. And then to have it blown up back in your face, thrown right back at you on the stage at the AFC Championship game, it's a tough scene. And I got a lot of thoughts on this game. We have 2 hours to talk about it. We have Brian Billick coming up here in a little bit. So I know that this show is going to be filled with a lot of that. But I'm not sure if AFTAB was where I thought I was going to go on my first thought, but boy, did it really got under my skin. And we talked about it a lot here in the office on Friday. And I can't believe he did that. And it so clearly motivated these guys. You heard from, I think it was Patrick Mahomes, talking about how, or was it Andy Reid? Somebody mentioned how they felt like they had never seen the Chiefs this motivated.
Yeah.
And to me, I was shocked. I don't know. It's just how I am that to me, you would want to let your play do the talking afterwards. And I know the Bengals had beaten the Chiefs 3 times. But to me, there was just so much buildup. There was so much trash talking on both sides. There was so much. And I know a lot of that's good-natured. I'm not trying to take away from it and be a Debbie Downer here. But did the Bengals get a little bit of a reality check yesterday, Tom?
I think they did. I think they did, and I think for a lot of us, and I know a lot of you are going to get upset with me asking the question about Burrow winning the big one. I mean, look, he's taken him to the AFC Championship 2 years in a row. But this is where legacies are built. And, you know, Mahomes already had more tenure in the league. He'd already been to a couple of Super Bowls. He's the first quarterback under the age of 30 to take his franchise to a championship game all 5 years as a starter, and he's only 27. And you know he'll be back in another one before he's 30. But what he did yesterday, look, and you can say that he was a clown afterwards. I thought that Kelsey was a complete clown afterwards. But, you know, in fairness, this whole thing had been building. You know, you go back and you examine the NFL film stuff. Now, to me, you know, a lot of that stuff that was said, Burrowhead and Mike Hilton and all that kind of thing, those are just teammates talking to each other on the sideline, you know? And so you can get into the whole debate about, is that something that should have been released to the public maybe after this championship game?
Yeah.
Now, some would say the timing's not the same. I get it. But, you know, I'm not going to sit here and beat up any of the Bengals players for the stuff they said on the sideline while they were celebrating the win over Buffalo a week ago, because that's their domain.
Yep.
That's their place. And the NFL is, I'm not going to call it intruding, because it's part of what makes the NFL so great, is that they get players to do this kind of thing. The legacy of NFL films is just incredible. And the sound and bringing you inside the game or inside the huddle or, you know, on the sideline, whatever it might be. You know, there are a couple of things for me during the course of the game that stand out that I just don't understand. You and I were talking about this before the game. So we'll break these two down individually. I'll mention them collectively and we'll break them down. When the Bengals have the ball, basically the last time they had the ball, they're at the 36-yard line. You've got all the time in the world. You have 2 timeouts left. Okay, now look, let me preface by saying we all agree on this, okay? It might have been the greatest catch in Bengals franchise history. The 4th down, they throw the ball up top inside the 5. Chase goes up top, makes a catch. That is a very low percentage pass and catch, but they did it. So you give it up to them, okay? But I'm talking about now, they're 3rd and 16. They're double teaming because of the injury to Boyd. They're double teaming Higgins. They're double teaming Chase, and they find Hurst, and they get the first down, and you're thinking they're in business. The next play, they go for 7 yards. So you're just inside your own 40. You've got a field goal kicker who's gotten it back together, and clearly a money kicker has proven it already in just 2 years. It's 2nd down and 3. You throw a deep ball, incomplete. It's now 3rd down and 3. The last thing you want to do is give the ball to Patrick Mahomes one more time. For the life of me, I cannot understand why you are throwing a 35-yard pass down the field. A long throw on 2nd and 3, low percentage throw. A damn near impossible percentage play, 3rd down and 3. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, I don't know if Burrow checked off at the line of scrimmage. I don't know. But for me, that's not the play call. 2nd and 3, 3rd and 3, 3 minutes to go in the game. And then the one, what in the world were they thinking of punting the ball to the Kansas City player where he can make a play on the ball and have a chance for a return? It is his common football 101 knowledge. In that situation, you tell your punter, punt the ball to the sideline or punt it on a low line drive where it's going to bounce a couple of times, and you don't give this guy a chance to return the ball. It just can't happen. Now, granted, it turned out to be the longest punt return the Chiefs have had this year, but they did it when they had to do it. Why would you ever allow that to happen? For him to field the ball in the air and then have a chance for a return. So let's start with the 2nd and 3 and the 3rd and 3. It was clear, as I mentioned, because of Tyler Boyd, that they were double teaming Chase and Higgins. Romo laid it out there as good as you can lay it out there. That's what they were doing. That's why Hurst was so wide open on the 3rd and 16. They didn't even pay attention to it. And Irwin, they said, who cares? That's what they did. Okay? So why are you throwing the ball deep? 2nd and 3, you have 2 timeouts. There's nearly 4 minutes left in the game, or a little more than 3 minutes left in the game. All you've got to do is get 2 or 3 more first downs. You basically run out the clock right there. You kick a field goal, you take the lead. Then you're going to kick off, and Kansas City's going to have to go down the field with no timeouts left and try and kick a field goal. Now, Paul, I don't get it. I just don't get it. It's the difference between a 3-point shot in basketball, a long 3, and a layup. You'll take the layup from a percentage standpoint or a dunk all day, every day, over a 3-point try.
Yeah, it was really frustrating watching the game play out because when they go up there was 3rd and 14, 3rd and 16, whatever it was, where they got the completion to Hayden Hurst, and you're backed up in the shadow of your own goalpost. The offensive line is crunching in on you. Chris Jones has had an amazing day, and Joe Burrow keeps standing in there, just has to stand in, take it, stand in, take it. But they get out of their own goalposts. They get out. They get out enough that now you're starting to think, okay, like you said, Tom, if you get 2, 3, 4 more first downs, this game is over. And ideally, it's like what you said in the open. Joe Burrow gets the ball with 2.5 minutes left. You're thinking to yourself, this game is over, right? This is a legacy drive for Joe Burrow. We've seen him do it time and again. He gets the ball, he goes down, he scores, he wins the game. Or if you get in the semantics of it, Evan McPherson wins the game. But to me, there was just something off last night. Yeah. I don't know what it was, but it seemed like from the beginning there was something off. And I remember last year in the Super Bowl, there was a throw early on in the game in the Super Bowl where you could tell Joe overthrew one. It was a little route out to the sideline. I don't remember who the intended receiver was, but I just remember that was a pass that Joe almost always hits, and he overthrew the pass. And I remember thinking throughout the whole Super Bowl, he seems off.
Yep.
And I know he threw 2 interceptions last night, but look, one of them was basically a punt. One of them was on 3rd down. Credit to T. Higgins for making an incredible tackle on that interception. Because in the end, that ended – I know it says he threw 2 interceptions, but that pass was going to be incomplete. It got picked off. Maybe in the end it ended up working out with the way Chrisman was punting. It may have ended up working out better for the Bengals the way it actually happened. But it just seemed to me, and I'm not blaming this at all on Joe, I just felt like it wasn't – when he had the ball with 2.5 minutes left and they got that first down, I still kept thinking, all right. But I don't know, Tom. There was just something off. It just felt like something that's not tangible, something I couldn't put my finger on. I don't know what it was, but I was just sitting there thinking to myself, something doesn't feel right here. And when they punted the ball back, and then you see the return, and then you see the late hit out of bounds, it all evaporated so fast. It felt like 2016. It felt like I was watching the Jeremy Hill fumble and then all the penalties. Yep. It felt like just deja vu all over again. And I just kept sitting there feeling helpless, thinking, man, even if you don't have that late hit out of bounds, I mean, that's going to be a 60-yard field goal, something like that.
Yep.
You go to overtime. And that's the one thing that I'll say about the field goal at the end with Osai and everything else, is that it's always really hard for me to get too upset at somebody like Osai when the game was tied. Because you never know. They could have kicked a field goal. They could have thrown a Hail Mary. They could have gone to overtime and lost. There's no way in my mind I can blame Osai for this game last night, especially with how he played. You can't do that because it's not like the Bengals were winning by 2 and that field goal meant that they lost by 1. That's a different story, because that, in my mind, is, oh no, you may have directly cost your team the game there because you had the lead and you made a dumb play and you gave it away. But to me, in a tie game, when you go to overtime and so many things can happen in a road game, I just can't bring myself to put any blame on Joseph Ossai, or at least not enough blame to where it really matters. The overall point that I want to make from this game, though, Tom, this game has to be at home in the future. The Bengals are fighting an uphill battle 2 years in a row to have to go to Buffalo, to Kansas City, and then get back to the Super Bowl. Think about what the Eagles did.
Yep.
The Eagles beat Daniel Jones, and they beat a fourth-string quarterback and then a guy who barely had an arm to get to the Super Bowl. Being the 1 seed and being able to play at home, you only have to play 2 games, and you're probably getting an easier 2 games. And you get them at home. It's just asking so much for this Bengals team to have to go and play Patrick Mahomes at Arrowhead 2 years in a row and expect to win. It's an uphill battle. And if you're the Bengals next year, there's a lot of roster turnover here. You probably think in the offseason, you just got to play for the 1 seed next year. You got to get this game at home.
Well, There are just so many ways to go here, and a lot of people in the chat want to get into the officiating. We'll get into that here in a second. But I still say to myself, and I'm with you on Ossai, I feel terrible for the kid because, look, he was injured last year. About midway through this year, he starts getting playing time. I think we all agree, of all the defensive linemen in the game yesterday, especially as it pertains to the pass rush, Ossai was the best pass rusher they had on the field yesterday.
Yep.
He was that good. Kid played a great game. And I just feel awful for him, and seeing him sit on the sideline in tears. Afterwards, he if you didn't read the accounts in the locker room, B.J. Hill basically came over and started taking questions for Ossai. Sam Hubbard had stepped in and said, hey, look, can you guys give this young man a little bit of extra time? Hubbard said that really at the end of the day on that scramble by Mahomes, where the penalty was called on the hit by Ossai out of bounds, Hubbard took full responsibility of not containing his position from the outside, which allowed Mahomes to go around the corner, get over near the sideline, and then that's when the penalty was called. And it was a right call. I mean, it was a right call. If it would have happened to Burrow, everybody would be screaming and yelling for the same thing, although I still don't understand the one hit on Burrow after he had thrown the ball and the guy just knocks him right over. And Burrow turns around to the official like, you got to be kidding. No call there.
You mean the one in the end zone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're going to call it, you got to call it. And we've seen that called all year long. But you're right about the vibe from the beginning. Look, the last 4 games, and we talked a lot about this last week, the last 4 games where the Bengals are getting the ball first, they had outscored their opponents in the first quarter 39-0. In the last 4 games, they were jumping all over people, just like Buffalo last week. Touchdown on the opening drive, get the ball back, touchdown on the next drive, 14-0. But yesterday they get the ball first, and all of a sudden, here comes this pass rush from Kansas City. We said all along that it was going to be a far bigger task facing this front 7 than it was with Buffalo minus Von Miller the week before. And, look, they gave up 4 sacks in the first half. Chris Jones was unquestionably a man possessed. I brought up last week that Jones had not had a single postseason sack in 14 career postseason games. Forget what he had done in the 3 games against the Bengals, where, by the way, he didn't have a sack. But he did not have one single postseason sack. You could tell by his interview on Friday up on the podium when he kept saying Burrowhead, Burrowhead, Burrowhead. This was a guy who, whatever little extra motivation he may have needed, he found it. Because he was the guy we watched during the regular season, 15 and a half sacks. He's one of 3 players up for the NFL's Defensive Player of the Year award. He kept prodding around as we thought he would because they move him around a lot. They wanted to find, was there one player or players that he could take advantage of along that offensive line, and he did. But, that offensive line, look, they stepped in there against the Ravens. They stepped in there beautifully against Buffalo. I'm not going to sit here and beat them down for what happened yesterday. But just the whole start of the game, and then you get into red zone, which, we're going to have Brian Billick coming on here in a minute, and you talk all the time. If you just look at 2 stats and don't look at anything else in the box score, number 1 by far and away is turnovers. Almost all the time you can tell who won the game by who won the turnover battle. That's the story of the NFL. There are outliers, but it's overwhelmingly in favor of the team that commits the fewest number of turnovers. That's number 1. Number 2 is what happens when you get in the red zone. And that's where the Bengals' offense has been great all year. It's where their defense has been great all year. Kansas City's offense has been good in the red zone this year. Their defense had been brutal. But the first 2 trips in the red zone for the Bengals, they have to kick field goals rather than touchdowns. So they were trailing 13-6 at the half. Defense was unbelievable in the second half, but Kansas City wins the game. Speaking of Brian Billick, former Super Bowl winning head coach with the Baltimore Ravens. Brian, you're sitting there watching it. Everybody around here naturally livid with the officiating in the game. Now, look, you had your, bumps in the road with officials through the years back when you were a head coach. To me, that whole crew, and I'm not saying it was a difference between winning and losing, but there are 4 or 5 plays, and maybe it's true in every game, that you can go back and look on and look no further than the punt return that set up the game-winning field goal. Where, as clear as a day is long, there's 2 blocks in the back. You see that penalty called all the time. What was your impression of the officiating in the game?
It was, and you're right. The good thing now is they can't find me like when I was coaching, so I could. It was a poorly administered game. That's what struck me more than anything. Calls, missed calls, and the like. That's going to happen to a degree.
Brian, hang on a second here. I think we're having an issue. No. We got his mic on now?
Yeah.
Are we good? Okay, Brian, go ahead. What were you saying?
Okay.
There we go.
As I was saying before, it was a poorly administered game is what struck me by. The calls themselves, they're going to happen. They're not going to happen. But poorly administered game, I thought, and which is unfortunate. And regardless of what the league says, they do call it different in the postseason than they do the regular season. That's just a fact. And so it's unfortunate, particularly for it to end. Your heart's got to go out to the young man. That's going to linger with him for a long, long time. Clearly, it was a penalty. Made the difference in the game, obviously, or at least giving them a chance. But yeah, I would agree that I think it's a poorly administered game. But it probably cut both sides, so it wasn't going to really affect the outcome of the game. But it was, and you sized it up and listened to you before. It all came down to the protection. We talked about going into it, concerns about the offensive line, and then they performed brilliantly against the Buffalo Bills. And you thought, okay, they're going to hold up. They're going to be okay because the front 7 of the Buffalo Bills, most people I think would concede is better than the front 7 of the Kansas City Chiefs. But that first half, Burrow they were beating him to his drop. And it's probably a good thing because that young man Reddick for Philadelphia, the way he tore up Trent Williams, maybe the best tackle in football. I can't imagine what he'd do against that Bengal line if they were in the Super Bowl.
Walk me through a couple of things, Brian. I want to start with the actual punt itself. And I made the comment that, being around guys like you and some other guys through the years, that here you were punting the ball, getting the ball back to Kansas City after, to me, inexplicably, and we'll get to this for a minute, why on 2nd and 3 and on 3rd and 3 you're throwing low percentage 25, 30-yard balls down the field. Okay, so now it comes time to punt. Walk me through the thinking of the head coach and what he expects from the special teams coach. I guess what I'm getting at here is Can you allow the Kansas City player to catch the ball in the air? Based on your experience, are punters not good enough directionally or whatever it might be to kick it towards the sideline? Hell, kick it out of bounds for that matter.
Yeah, I mean that would have been the prudent thing to do, but there again, you got to execute it. That kicker, their kickoff guy, darn near kicked it out of bounds on a kickoff, which would have been brutal, giving them the ball. It just ended up bouncing in and being a touchback in that regard. But yeah, it's hard for me to imagine that they weren't directionally punting, and the kicker just screwed up. And because that affects the return as well. And I just in watching the game, I haven't looked at the tape, may be totally wrong on this, but the way he was broke to the outside, because when you directionally punt, your team has to know that's where you're going. It's not a secret, right? Because your coverage has to be, okay, we're going to punt. You call them in zones 1, 2, and 3. We're kicking to zone 1. So they know, all right, that's the angle you should be approaching, because we're going to use the sideline, in this instance, the right sideline, as we're speaking from the punting team, and we're going to pin it into that sideline. So your rush lanes are dictated by where the ball's going to go. Well, if he cranks that thing in the middle of the field, the players, the rush team, the punt team doesn't know that. And his ability to get outside to the right, again, I could be totally wrong, but indicates to me that maybe it was supposed to be a directional punt, and the kicker, the punter, wasn't able to pull it off.
You have the ball with 3 minutes left, a little more than 3 minutes left. You got a couple of timeouts in your pocket. Now, hey, look, I gave the credit where the credit is due, although you and I both know you've forgotten more about it than I'll know. On the fourth down, throw down the middle of the field where Chase, goes up in the air between two defenders, hauls it inside the 5-yard line. It leads to a game-tying touchdown. That's fine. You made a play. But 2nd and 3, after you convert a 3rd and 16, 2nd and 3 and 3rd and 3, you're throwing the ball 15, 20, 30, 40 yards down the field. And knowing the likelihood of those plays being made again are certainly very, very low from a percentage standpoint. Look, early in the year, there were a lot of questions about the play calling. I think that's true. It happens everywhere. You've heard about it back in your days as a play caller. But, Brian, 2nd and 3, 3rd and 3, and those are the play calls?
Well, you have to know what exactly the play call was. Could have been a check.
Yeah.
From the run. It also, and it's tough on a quarterback in any structure. You're going to have a deep element, an intermediate, and a shallow element on virtually every route. And the way Kansas City configured, this is without looking at the film. Okay, so they may very well said, okay, we're going to take away the underneath stuff. We're going to dare you to throw the ball deep. And the way Burrow and Higgins and Chase were hitting it, and even Hurst, that's pretty good percentages. I kind of like that. And there's always the case that it's open down the field and he dumps it off. It's, my God, why didn't you take the deep shot? And then he takes the deep shot and the underneath is wide open. Why didn't you go underneath? It's damned if you, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
So without knowing the exact play call, I thought, particularly leading into that, particularly when they popped that big run with Joe Mixon, how many times have we seen that in Cincinnati where in the last quarter they start to really crank that run game up and they grind down the clock and they get the big chunks? When he hit that one, I thought, okay, that now we're gonna see that Cincinnati formula, and they're gonna pop some good physical runs down here, play action, maybe get a big shot off of it, but obviously didn't transpire that way.
Brian, after you have that kind of a loss, and your staff, you get back. What's today like? Not just for how you feel. I mean, I think everybody understands how they must feel, although you can't walk in their shoes. But from just strictly an administrative standpoint, you've had these guys together going all the way back to beginning of August, training camp. You go through your ups and downs like every single team. You get beat. The last second of the game with a chance to make it back-to-back Super Bowls. You've got so many really valuable players on this team that could be, probably will be, walking out the door as free agents. What's today like?
It's painful. It's a shock to the system. It truly is, because when you get to that point, particularly getting the way Cincinnati did, going in and beating Buffalo, you really believe, and all the teams are the same way, getting to the championship game, you believe you're that team of destiny. You believe you're going to the Super Bowl and win it. And when it doesn't happen, it is a shock to the system. And so they're just kind of numb right now. They'll come in and do the administrative things to kind of clean up, also realizing, as every team does, that 2 minutes after the season's over, it changes because now the business side kicks in. And there are going to be changes. So that team, that band of brothers that you fought together so hard all year long, now you realize it's going to be different. And that's a tough. So the whole thing is a shock to the system, particularly the way it ended. And then to have to listen for the next 2 weeks incessantly about the Super Bowl, which is great. We all get to talk about it and get to, get excited about what should be a very, very good game. But it just compounds it. You do your, at best, you want to get away someplace where you don't hear it, you don't see it, take off and go someplace because it just, it takes a while to get over.
On the business side of it, Brian, I'm curious on a day like today where every team has a lot of big-time guys that can become free agents, et cetera, especially for this Bengals team and especially on the defensive side of the ball. Look, they know that Chase is coming back. They know they can tag Higgins. They know they're going to get a Burrow contract done. So 3 of your biggest stars on offense are going to be back next year. Tyler Boyd, too, for that matter. But, when it comes to, the Von Bells of the world and guys like this, you had a very active owner in Steve Bisciotti there after you also had a very active owner in Art Modell there. You had Ozzie Newsome as your general manager there. Do those guys come down and say anything to those players who are wondering whether or not they're going to come back next year?
You do, and you try to be encouraging because you want them all back. But everybody knows you just can't do it. People need to understand, including the players. Unlike Major League Baseball and basketball and the like, the pie is only so big. Now, it's a big pie. I mean, it's 210 million, going to go up to 225, 230 million, 240 for the cap. But just like slicing up your pizza, right? There's only so many pieces. And the bigger one piece, the smaller the other piece. And it just doesn't fit. You talked about Ozzie Newsome in Baltimore. One of their hallmarks was they were willing to make the tough decisions and letting good players that you'd love to keep go. But you just can't pay them market because you're paying somebody else. And every dollar goes into one contract has to come out of another. And that's a tough circumstance. But the players know that. It's my God, this should be that way. I should be able to stay here. But by the same token, also, it's an opportunity means I get to go get a big payday. So there's you've heard me say it a million times. My mentor, Denny Green, God rest his soul, always said this. So there's time for pay and there's time for play. And during the season, you're constantly, guys, time's to play. Well, now it's time to get paid. And so you got to recognize that's just the business side of it. And we'll work through it, keep as many as we can, and then see how we can fill in when we have the attrition that's naturally going to come.
Yeah, based on your experience, and obviously you had some great offensive stars, you had a lot of great defensive stars, you had all that kind of thing with Baltimore. Is it easier to replace, say, guys in the secondary? So, with the Bengals, you've got Eli Apple, who, look, whether you like the guy or don't like the guy, he's played very well for the Bengals here. You've got Jesse Bates, who's had a really nice career here. You've got Von Bell, who has really played well here. He's a leader and really looked up to and respected by everybody. Is it easier to replace those positions on a team or tight ends, a third wide receiver, things like that? What would be more important looking ahead to the Bengals if you were the guy trying to figure out the contracts without getting into we're going to give this guy this much and that guy that much?
Well, and you have to go through that exercise. You have to basically quantify and just look at the franchise number on each player. That tells you where the value is. I mean, that's that you can cut to the chase, and if you just follow that, obviously the tight end contract, the safety contract is lower than the corner and the receiver contract. The rush end contract is bigger than the defensive tackle contract. which all of them tend to be higher than most of the offensive line cuts. So that tells you where, okay. And that's the thing. I only say it half jokingly, but in the old days, when you'd sit down in personnel meetings and say, okay, well, we need a guard. Well, do you want a pass protecting guard? Do you want a zone blocking guard? Do you want a man guard? Now it's, okay, we need a guard. Well, do you want a $5 million guard? You want a $10 million guard? Or do you want a $20 million guard? That's probably a little high, but you see what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how it's striated. And as Ozzie would always remind me, it's for me as a coach going through it, because the money, was simple. It wasn't my money. So it's, let's pay them all. But you put it into real context when you come in and say, okay, yeah, we can keep player A, but it's going to cost you player B, C, D, and E. So which do you want? You want these 4 guys? Or do you want this one guy and we'll try to fill in with the other 4? Now, when you put it in those terms, now it gets to be very, what is one guy worth in the scheme of what you're doing? And how readily can you fill in at the other positions? Yeah, there are certain positions that are harder to find. Tight end, there's a lot of talented, young, athletic tight ends coming into the league. And so that's one that you have fairly confident.
Uh-oh. Billick's gone.
Just dropped out on us.
There he is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
There he is.
We
I got a phone call.
Go ahead. You were talking about tight ends.
Yeah. Why? You can use now. You're not talking the top guys, all right? Because it's a tough time. But there are certain positions that particularly top tier players, the top tier corner, you kind of feel like, although it's changing because of the quality of tight ends now in the league, you got to have a top caliber safety. It used to be, okay, we can get by with maybe lesser athletes at safety. I don't know if that's the case anymore. Everybody wants that big impact interior defensive lineman now. Pass rush up the middle is a very vogue thing. So, and you got to look a little bit, okay, what's the draft? Is it a good year for DBs in the draft? Is it a good year for tight ends in the draft? What about the free agent market? Is there going to be some backside free agent pickups that you end up and getting good deals on? So that, you have to factor it all in.
Last 2 things I want to ask you about, just to finish this whole thing and forward thinking. I think every Bengals fan's worst nightmare is you give Burrow all this money, and like you just said, at the expense of who or what, right? And I sit there and I'm looking at Kansas City, and they gave Mahomes a king's ransom, rightfully so. 5 straight AFC championships, 3rd Super Bowl, trying to win his 2nd. But Tyreek Hill walked out the door. I look at Aaron Rodgers. They pay him through the nose. Devontae Adams walks out the door. For Bengals fans, is that perhaps a blueprint of what might be coming?
Oh, absolutely. You have to just look at the teams. What's the franchise number for a quarterback now? 45 million. Lamar Jackson, if they put the franchise tag on, I think it's 45 million on a 200 million plus 250 million cap. So that means a 5th-year entire budget is on one player. Those dollars are real. So what do? That's why it's so imperative to get the contracts where you can stretch out the value of the contract, minimize the cap implications in a given year. But by the same token, now Cincinnati's a very young team, so this isn't necessarily the problem. It's when you try to do that and you extend on some of the older contracts, the older players, that leaves you at some point with dead money. That, at some point you got to even up the credit card. So that's the challenge right now for a Cincinnati team, or you look at Josh Allen in Buffalo. Obviously, they're dealing with Lamar Jackson coming the same way. How do we give them these new contracts and structured in a way that gives us still the room to put the pieces around them? And what that means is they're giving these huge contracts with larger and larger guarantees that get spread out over a longer period of time, which become problematic as well. But so it's, pay me now or pay me later. And these are the kind of tough determinations you have to make.
Last question I want to ask you about the NFC game. I can't imagine for a coach or for a team, all the players on that team, that there could have been a worse nightmare scenario than what happened with the 49ers. I mean, the second play of the game, Fred Warner gets hurt. Shortly thereafter, Bosa's out. And then all of a sudden, the big hit to Purdy, and you're giving the ball to Josh Johnson. I mean, God bless the guy. He's hung around 14 years. But, I mean, you knew that game, it was over right then and there.
Yeah, and it's tough because, you can't feel sorry for yourself. I mean, it is what it is. Injuries are always going to play a factor. What you worry about, I mean, at the time is, okay, how do I keep my team? Because, they're thinking the same thing. And if they emotionally give into, okay, oh boy, well, this just isn't going to happen. That's tough to overcome. They'll say the right thing, and yeah, we'll fight through it. And you got to, next man, it's the next man up. Well, the next man up's not as good. Otherwise, you wouldn't be the next man up. And on the road in Philly on a very physical team, yeah, it emotionally was a lot to overcome. Well, that's just fate. That's just the way the game fell. We'll go after it and see if we can dust ourselves off. And because you always look at the teams that lose in the championship game or lose in the Super Bowl, and emotionally, how do they handle? San Francisco will at least emotionally be able to go, well, okay, the football gods just decided this isn't going to happen. Given the injuries, not to make an excuse, but I mean, so they'll okay, we're going to come back and reconstitute and what great shape are they in with these young quarterbacks? Because now they whether it's a Brock Purdy or Trey Lance, they don't have to pay those guys for a while. They're not facing the same dilemma that some of the teams with really good quarterbacks. So they're going to be able to utilize their cap space and wrap some teams around it with and for a couple of years now, because it looks like they've kind of struck gold with the Brock Purdy.
Brian, we thank you so much, my friend. Have a great rest of your day today.
We'll do it.
All right, Brian Billick, Super Bowl winning head coach from the Baltimore Ravens, kind enough to join us and add his insight. I love hearing this stuff about, what today is like down there at that facility. They got in very, very late last night. It wasn't like it was a cross-country trip, but, 6:30 game, didn't end until 10 o'clock. You got to deal with the media. It takes forever to get on a plane when you got 100 guys or 80 guys, whatever it is, with coaches and everything. Believe me, it takes football teams forever to get out the door and everybody showered up on the buses, get to the airport. It was a very, very late night, no doubt, and an early morning. Guys are coming in there right now as we speak. Some guys, they know they're going to be here, so they don't have to, the proverbial clean out the locker. Some other guys, you got to pack everything you have because you just don't know. Whether it's Von Bell, Jesse Bates has been here 6 years. And now all of a sudden, he's thinking, okay, I got the tag this year. They probably can't afford to bring both of those guys back. I don't know if they can afford to bring either one of them back. And the thing you got to keep in mind about all this is they don't have to do Burrow's contract this offseason. They don't have to. That's not the deal. Okay? He is still technically going into the 4th year of his rookie contract. Now, you want to tag him and start making, you don't have to tag him, but, do you want to pay him when you don't have to pay him yet? I think that's going to be, at the end of the day, the single most interesting decision the Bengals front office is going to make, because everybody knows he's going to get paid. You want to make sure he does get paid, and you want him here forever. He's a quarterback you believe you can win the Super Bowl with, right? But they're not obligated to get that done this offseason, nor are they obligated to get anything done with Jamar Chase this offseason, nor are they obligated on a long-term deal to get anything done with T. Higgins this offseason. You could have Burrow play the final year of his rookie contract. Now, you want to talk about getting under a guy's skin, deep under a guy's skin. The only stipulation with this Burrow thing, and the reason people are talking about it, is because there's a clause based on a number of factors where they can begin to engage in a long-term contract negotiation for Burrow, but they don't have to do it. Chase is even a year behind him, so they don't have to do anything with him. Higgins, his rookie contract is up. so they don't have to give him a long-term deal. They can franchise tag him, and he'll make whatever the top 5, average of the top 5 or 10 players at his position in the NFL. And it would be a ton, a lot more than he's making now. We got Tim McGee coming up in about 7 minutes, so let's see. Send him the link.
Okay.
He just sent me a text, and we're going to talk with him. We're going to take a commercial timeout. We thank the hundreds and hundreds of you that are in with us right now. And we'll hear from – I'm really interested to hear from Tim McGee. He thought Kansas City was going to win this game, and he was spot on. All right, we're back with Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, in just a moment.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time, and if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
Where can you turn when you're in pain? Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Swinney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Swinney, the original used car superstore.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time, and if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
All right, welcome back to Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. We thank Paul Frischner for all his very hard work here today. He's solo. I mean, we're the only 2 here. Everybody else is gallivanting around Kansas City and points between Kansas City and Lawrence, Kansas, where I guess they are, it's only about a half-hour ride, whatever it is, down the road. And they're all hanging out at some casino, Paul. They're, they hung out last night. Went to the game in some cases, and hanging around another night tonight, all day today. Lord knows what they're doing today.
Yeah, I don't know.
The game's not till tomorrow night, right?
I don't know what they're doing today. I know yesterday they went to the College Basketball Hall of Fame and the whole college basketball experience out there in Kansas City. So I don't know what they did or what they're doing today. I know Sean Spurlock, one of the co-founders here at Chatterbox, he's flying out there today. They're going to Kansas and Kansas State tomorrow night at Allen Fieldhouse. If you remember, this was all the way back from December from the bet that Trace put in about the Pac-12 championship with Utah and USC. He said that if Utah won that game against USC, if they covered in that game, that he was going to take everybody out there to Kansas. I would have loved to have gone. Just couldn't make it work. I have to broadcast a game tomorrow night. So just the schedules didn't line up. Can't make it work. But I know that'll be a great experience. I'm hoping one day, I know I will, make it out to Allen Fieldhouse. So they'll all be out there. I don't know what they're doing. They're staying out there at one of the casinos. They're just –
well, I mean, it's perfect. I'd imagine the weather stinks. It was obviously very cold yesterday. I had a chance to do some stuff yesterday on the Bengals radio network, and Mo Egger, who, of course, hosts an afternoon drive time show over on 1530, checked in and was saying that, that brutal cold that we had here that week before Christmas, few days before Christmas, right around Christmas, and how cold it was. He said to him, it felt every bit that cold in Kansas City yesterday. Really didn't seem to have much of an effect on the game in any form or fashion. I mean, the one turnover that Mahomes had on that fumble, it looked to me like he just had his eye on the receiver and he was trying to catch a snap and get rid of it really fast. And he took his eye off the ball and it turned into a fumble, and that was that. But I didn't think weather was a big factor.
No,
at all yesterday.
No, I didn't either. And it comes to a point, honestly, it comes to a point where do the players like playing in the cold? I don't know if it really mattered at all. I don't think there was anything that gave me any reason to think that the cold played a factor. I know the fans, it was freezing. I heard from people that were there that they said it was very, very, very cold. But yeah, I just don't think that the weather really played a factor at all. And thinking back to the pass rush from last week when we were looking at the Bengals and their offensive line against the Bills, and we talked about, well, maybe there was some smoke and mirrors there with the Bengals offensive line last week, where I know they didn't have Chris Jones. I know the Bills don't have Chris Jones. I get that. But maybe there was some smoke and mirrors there where you're playing in the snow and it's slick and you can't get off the line the right way. And then now all of a sudden you got to go out there to Kansas City where you're not playing in the snow and the offensive line gets blown up. And it's just a shame that it played out the way it did with the offensive line, because to the Bengals' credit in the front office, they spent so much time, effort, and financial energy in helping out this offensive line and in investing resources into this offensive line, and it was good. But not having Alex Kappa, it didn't show last week in Buffalo. Tom, it really showed last night.
Yeah, it did. But I think they have everybody, if I'm not mistaken, outside of La'el Collins, because those aren't guaranteed contracts in the NFL. They've got Karras back. They've got Kappa back. You've got Volson. He was a rookie this year. You're going to find a spot for either Carman or Adeniji, depending on what you want to do with the right tackle spot. And Collins, he's coming all the way back from a serious knee injury. The left tackle spot is one where, now that one might take a different kind of turn. I'm not sure how that's going to play out regarding Jonah Williams, because he showed a lot of toughness this year. He dislocated that kneecap, did not miss a game. But at the same time, he did not have a very good year. And so, now this is the kind of stuff that a lot of you are much better versed than I am. But Rowdy Every Point says the Bengals project to be about $35 million under the salary cap, as it is. And they can create even more space, of course, depending on who they keep. He thought they could sign, if they wanted to, Higgins on a 4-year deal, front load the contract for 2023 cap space. You could do that, or you could just tag him. But that would be a big hit on the cap space if you tag him, because it's a 1-year contract.
Tom, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I think the Bengals probably have one more year in this window that we're in right now. I know that Joe Burrow said that, the window is my whole career. I know he said that. They probably have one more year, though, in this window. If that was this in this iteration of the Bengals, Was this the shot, or do they have one more year?
Oh, I think they've got more than one more year. I think that Brian just said it. That's why I was asking the question about, figuring out, okay, look, everybody here loves Hayden Hurst. You love his toughness. You love the way he plays, his passion, his fire. But look, I think there are a number of guys that could do the same job that Hayden Hurst did for this team this year. Everybody was upset when Uzama left. I think Hurst is a better player than Uzama. And they got a guy on a one-year contract who, things didn't work out. After being a high draft pick in Baltimore, went to Atlanta for a little while. They let him go. He comes here. He's a standout player thanks in large part to all the other weapons, and you can't defend everybody. And I think you're going to have all those same weapons back next year. You're going to have Burrow, Higgins, Boyd, Chase next year. Start there. So whatever player comes in to be the tight end, you'll find a guy that can come in and catch passes and do all those kinds of things. You'll find that guy. So, okay, you might have to just say, all right, we'll offer you something. Hurst might feel like he can get something better, which he probably will in terms of money, and so off he goes. You look at most of the defense, but that's secondary. Hilton's a year older. He had a tough game yesterday. I love Mike Hilton. I love what he's all about, but he had a tough day. Cameron Britt came on, Taylor Britt, and played very well. Dax Hill, I don't know. But they drafted the guy to take over eventually for Jesse Bates, right? Eli Apple played well yesterday. He played very well yesterday. And I know he's a lightning rod. But you've got to find guys to replace these guys. That's the bottom line. And then the whole Von Bell thing, who I think everybody agrees, along with Reeder, those are the two leaders on this defense. And I know I'm in the minority on this opinion. You've got Pratt, who's up as a free agent. In my opinion, he's a better player than Logan Wilson. Wilson gets more tackles, but boy, he was a step late and $1 short on some big plays yesterday in that game. And I know that, his contract's not up yet either. But the way that football is played today, I would have a very hard time paying a linebacker a lot of money. Unless it was a pass rushing linebacker who's going to go out and get you 14, 15, 17 sacks in a season.
Yeah.
Because just lining up, most teams are not playing 3 linebackers anymore. They're playing 2. They're playing 5 DBs. You're not using your linebackers oftentimes in blitzing situations, things like that. Sir Boy Wonder points out that he was very upset. Now, my son started to bring this up with me, and I'm curious. He was very upset with some of the comments made by Pratt walking off the field yesterday. Do you know what he's talking about?
Yeah, I'm not going to pull it up because there's a lot of profanity in it.
Okay.
I'm not going to pull it up, but it was tweeted out, and it's very easy to find on Twitter if anybody wants to go look at it. I think SportsCenter may have even tweeted it out. But it was basically Jermaine Pratt coming off the field, and there was a reporter that was down in the tunnel that got a video of Pratt basically screaming not directly at Joseph Osai. Osai wasn't there. He was just screaming into a void that he was basically, it came off that he was blaming Osai. That's the way it came off, and it wasn't a good look. There's not a ton of context to it in the sense, I don't know if you need context to it, but you could tell he was saying something as the video started, and then he said his piece, which very clearly was him blaming Osai on that last play, and then he walked into the locker room, and he was the only one saying anything, and the rest of the players and the staff and people that were walking in were quiet. It was a weird look. It was a bizarre look. It wasn't a good look. And if it is as transparent as it came across in the video, it's not a good look for Jermaine Pratt. But Tom, I don't know how much time you want to spend on this, but it's a storyline, and I think we got to talk.
Let me just say one thing in regard to I never put any stock, and I have to tell you, just like I'm not going to sit here. I don't like it. I don't like the way Kelsey, but that's his style. Passionate guy. If he's on your team, you love him. If he plays on the other team, you can't stand him. Okay? And walking over while they're trying to interview Mahomes and, Burrowhead, my blank, and all that sort of stuff. I don't like it. Win with grace, lose with grace. But I don't put a lot of stock into what guys say as they're walking off the field in an incredibly emotionally charged moment in their lives. And these are still very young people, okay? Because we all get, fired up, things that happen with our families or with our friends or, whatever it might be. And so while those comments clearly came across as not very flattering for Pratt, I'm not holding it against the guy because he's just really frustrated and disappointed. And all of those things are culminating at one time with the realization that, you love this group of players you played with the whole year. And now, like Brian said, the realization just smacks you right across the face that it is over. And for him, it might be over as a Bengal.
Yeah, that was the frustrating part for me with it, was that it got out. The reporter got it, tweeted the video out, and I understand. The reporter's doing their job. They get a piece of content like that. It's their job to tweet it out. I get it. But that's something that I'm sure the Bengals would have liked to have kept in-house, and it's an emotional time. You're coming off the field right after you think you're going to go to the Super Bowl. You have the ball. You think you're going to the Super Bowl, which is what you work your entire life for, and then it's ripped away from you, and the only thing that's tangible that you can point to is a boneheaded play on a penalty at the very end of the game. And if you want to use a scapegoat, that's it. I'm not going to do that. But if you want to use a scapegoat, that's it. And that's what he did. And it's emotional. I'm not going to hold it against Pratt for doing that. It's a bad look. I get it. But a lot of you never know what happens in the locker room with these kinds of things. It's just that it happened outside the locker room in a public forum. And that's.
So what were you going to say? You were getting ready to make another point.
I was going to say we haven't talked at all about the officiating, and it's a big storyline in this game, and I'm not one to blame the officials, but I think we do need to talk about it for a minute, Tom. The officiating, what I don't like is when the officiating becomes a storyline in a game like this between a heavyweight bout, two teams that are deserving of the spot, the two clear best teams in the AFC. And you get what you want. You get the AFC Championship game. It's at Arrowhead Stadium. All of the build-up all week. You want to go out there and you want to let the players play. You want to let the game decide itself. And for all of the speculation and for all of the people that kept saying, NFL rigged. The NFL is not rigged. It's not rigged.
No.
It's not rigged.
No chance.
But for the people that kept saying it was rigged after the coin toss and everything else that the Bengals had to overcome in the last few weeks getting to that point, it is a frustrating scenario to see the Bengals have to get 3 consecutive third down stops from the same officiating crew that cost the Bengals the Super Bowl last year. It was the same official, the same crew that all of a sudden threw the flag on the hold on Logan Wilson last year in the Super Bowl. Tim McGee's in here right now. I know we'll get him in here in a second, Tom. But I just think it's a shame that we even have to talk about the officials from a game like this where that should not be a storyline. Let the players play. Let the 2 greatest quarterbacks in the game right now decide the game on the field. If anything, it was the defenses that decided this game. And it's a shame that it played out the way it did. I just hate that we're sitting here having to talk about the officials, but it's too big of a storyline to ignore.
So you say we have Tim in?
Tim is in here.
Okay, let's get to the former Bengal great, Tim McGee. Tim, look, you're a guy who tells it like it is, whether it's on the Bengals radio network, whether it's on our show, and we're grateful for you hustling to try and get on with us here today. What do you take away from the game last night?
the Bengals lost. You have to fight through adversity throughout the year, fighting injuries, officiating, unforeseen things that happen during the season. And how quickly we forget, and obviously I'm a huge Bengal fan, but we tend to forget last year when we had the run, all the officiating, all the breaks, the bounce ball, the fumble ball went our way. So we have to be more thankful and grateful for all the positive things that happened. And when we look at yesterday, you just saw, you got what you expected. It was going to be a dogfight. There was going to be, I said this prior to the game over and over and again. If you were a fan that did not like close games that go back and forth, bounce back and forth, your team winning by 10, looks like you're gonna pull away, then the other team comes back, they look like they're gonna pull away, then they come back. It's a grinded out fight to the end. And we can look at certain plays throughout the game, certain official calls throughout the game, but ultimately you have to make the plays, and that's what Kansas City did. So I'll focus more on what happened positive with Kansas City. You look at Asai pushing Patrick Mahomes out of bounds. That was a byproduct of someone giving up contain.
Yep.
So if you're looking to finger point, go all the way back to the offense. As I was sitting on the couch watching TV with a couple of friends and my wife, I'm just like you guys. This game is over. We're going to the Super Bowl because you gave Joe Burrow 2 minutes and 2 timeouts, and you're not going to tell me they're not going to march down and get a field goal at minimum. That's what we've seen throughout this streak, throughout the year, throughout last year. That was their key and their success, formula of success, I should say. And you could not tell me, Thom, and no one else could tell me that the Bengals, I was ready to go. Let's pack them up. Let's roll. We're going to Arizona. And that didn't happen. And then, you had the absolutely mind-boggling 3rd and 9 call by the official. I still hadn't figured that one out. But when Patrick Mahomes got pushed out of bounds, there was a lot of other things. Yeah, you can, if you were a finger pointing, go ahead and blame that. But there was a lot more to it than just that one play.
Well, and after the game, Tim, I don't know if you had time to see the comments, but certainly Sam Hubbard and B.J. Hill both took full ownership of not having contained on that play. Even before Tim's got to run out real quick. Even before people had a chance.
I had to get the glare out.
I get it. But those guys took full ownership of that. They were trying to protect Osai from having to answer questions right away, giving him a little bit of a chance. His teammates will look out for one another and that kind of thing. So you're spot on that. I tell you though, Tim, for me, and I brought it up earlier in the show, 2 things, I guess 3 technically, but 2 things really stand out for me. You just alluded to Bengals have the ball, a little over 2 minutes to go, 2 timeouts left, and, they complete the pass on 3rd and 16 to Hurst to get the first down. Now they're just inside their own 40. They need probably 3 more first downs with as cold as it was to give McPherson a legitimate chance to win the game on a field goal. They get 7 yards on first down. Now, you know better than anybody because you were out there for 10 years as a wide receiver catching balls all over the NFL. The play that Chase made early in the game on the 4th down, he leaps in between 2 defenders, caught it inside the 5, a play for the generations of the franchise's history, right? We're never going to forget that play. Right. But on 2nd and 3 and 3rd and 3, I just cannot accept or understand. And again, I'm not saying it was Zach Taylor. It might have been a checkoff by Burrow. I don't know. I haven't read anything about it. But when you're 2nd and 3 and then 3rd and 3, and you're trying to keep the ball and get down the field for a field goal, at the very minimum, to prevent Mahomes from getting one more crack at it, I don't understand how you're throwing as low percentage passes as they threw on 2nd and 3 and 3rd and 3?
I think we have praised the trio of Callahan, Zach Taylor, and of course Joe Burrow. We've praised them, rightfully so. They deserve it. They also deserve the criticism that comes with the last 2 calls that were very conservative, and it was kind of out of character for them. They usually a aggressive attack type mentality. That's what they've shown throughout the years. But for some reason, those 2 calls were kind of a little head scratching to see them get so passive with the football. And obviously, one thing I wish I could get inside their mind. Obviously, I couldn't, but I would want to know and understand is, were they that confident / arrogant, because I think arrogance is good to a certain degree, that they felt like I did, that they were going to go down and score, and they wasn't really cognizant of the fact that they were going to give Patrick Mahomes, the most valuable player in the National Football League, probably, give him 40 seconds, and I think he had 1 timeout. That's the part that's kind of, what were they thinking? Okay, fine, you're not going for it on 2nd down because, like I said, you picked up 7 yards. Maybe you thought you would get it on 3rd down, but were someone up in the box understanding the fact that when you look at that clock, because the Bengals got it with 2 minutes left, you look at that clock, you're giving him roughly 40 seconds to march down the field, and lo and behold, guess what happens? They get a good punt return, and they get a completion here or there, and then they got backed up. But and we know consequently what happened in the end. But it was just kind of poor situational football, and that was uncharacteristic of them. I criticize all 3 because criticism I think is due. But it was kind of out of the box. I don't understand why they did what they did, especially leaving 40 seconds on the clock for Patrick Mahomes. Again, outside of Cincinnati, most people I would think thinks he's the most valuable player of the league.
Yeah, I mean, and there are those of us in Cincinnati that think he's the most valuable player in the league. Then comes the punt. And we walked through about this with Brian Billick a little bit. And look, people forget, not only were you an outstanding receiver, you were one of the top special teams players in the NFL for a number of years before you became a regular at wide receiver, and you weren't on special teams as much as you once were when you first came in the league out of Tennessee. But, Tim, how do you punt the ball and allow the guy to return it? I know you have to punt there. It's 4th down. I get it. But, I mean, good Lord, I don't know if there's miscommunication there. I just don't know how you even allow a guy to have the chance to return the ball there. Is that unfair thinking?
No, that's – so – what we're doing, we're pointing out the tactical, unforced errors the Bengals committed against themselves. Things that they could have very well controlled, as in they could have controlled just by running the ball on 2nd down or whatever. Yeah. They could have controlled the clock. They could have controlled the punt, and they didn't do it. They could have controlled the containment. So we're talking technical stuff. We're not talking physical. We're not talking about someone getting beat. We're talking mental. And mentally, the last 2 seconds of that football game was played very, very, very poorly by the staff and executed by the players. And the accumulation of all of it cost them an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. Specifically, when you talk about the punt, in that situation with such limited time, the biggest thing that can hurt you is a flop of field position. So you want to put that ball outside of the hash, whether it's left or right. You want to push that ball there. That way it limits the returner's ability to get back to the midfield. They kicked the ball right down the middle of the field. That's what mind-boggling in itself. Secondly, you can always kick the ball out of bounds, and they didn't do that either. So whether it was miscommunication, poor execution, it wasn't one phase. You look at special teams, breakdown, defense, breakdown, offense, breakdown. You could not have bet and I hear all these fan duels and this and that. You could not have bet that the Cincinnati Bengals, who had pretty much played flawless football throughout this last 10 weeks, you could not bet that, I would not have bet that they would make these 3 fundamental mistakes that would cost them an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl.
Tim, Joseph Asai played very, very well yesterday. A lot of people are going to only remember the personal foul penalty, which allowed Kansas City to kick the game-winning field goal and that kind of thing. But just as a teammate, and I mentioned earlier how guys like Reeder and Hubbard and Hill were really looking out for that young man after the game. We saw the emotion on the sideline. Can't imagine what it's like to walk in his shoes today. I mean, look, it's not the end of the world. There are a lot worse things that can happen in our lives than that we know. But this has got to be a pretty tough night and a pretty tough morning for that young man.
Yeah, and you mentioned Reeder and Hubbard coming to his side, but when it first happened, what you saw was a young man that was literally isolated by himself on the sidewalk, drowning himself in tears, and it was just piss poor that his teammates didn't immediately come to his side. So I seriously question that. I criticized that. That was BS. Maybe it took them some time to sink in, but they clearly left that kid on the sideline by him. Like I said, just totally over there isolated. Actually, my wife was just sitting there. She was almost in tears just to see what he was going through. And, it's the agony of defeat. There's no question about it. We've all been there. When we were watching the game last week and the announcers, when they came on the lead up to the game, the promo had me sitting on the sideline after the Super Bowl defeat. Not sitting on the sideline, sitting on the field with the last play of the game with my head down. So I know how it feels, but when you feel you personally impacted the game in a negative sense and some will label you as the fault of the loss, that's even tougher. But we as a professional athlete, Tom, you have thick skin, and yes, it's going to bother the young man, it's going to bother the team, but he'll get over it. They'll get over it. They'll move forward with it because they'll bond together as they soon did after the game. I just wish it would have happened just a little bit before the players got to the locker room, because if you watch the internet, you see Jermaine Pratt yelling, why in the F would you push or touch the quarterback? So, I know what comes out of the locker room that's politically correct, but there's a lot of guys that, my teammates, my ex-teammates, their teammates, there's a lot of guys that, not as forgiving or not as, I would say, being politically correct with the mistake that was made, because they knew and understood what was on the line, and that was a trip to win the championship.
All right, put on, if you would, the hat that now, and they've been thinking about this already, even knowing that they were getting ready to play in the AFC Championship game. Put on the hat of now trying to construct this team and moving ahead to next year. Look, every player has, at least in a front office's mind, what the value of that player is in terms of not only what their value is on the field, but what their value is in terms of a payday. They don't have to sign Burrow to the long-term deal yet. They don't have to sign Chase to a long-term deal. They don't have to sign Higgins to a long-term deal. They could tag him. But that would be a huge hit against a one-year hit on the salary cap issue. Then you have defenders. You have Jesse Bates. You have Von Bell. You have Eli Apple. You have Jermaine Pratt. Those are the 4 primary guys that come to mind on the defensive side of the ball that you don't have under some kind of deal or another next year. You have a gut feel to tell you, just a gut feel, on who you think comes back on that defensive side. So you got Apple, Pratt, Bell, Bates. What do you think?
I think Bates is gone because the market he's going to command in an open market, the salary he's going to command, and what they went through the last years, that would be a surprise. Not impossible, but I think that would be a surprise if he comes back. Von Bell, I think, will come back because, again, he's older, up in age. very solid, and coaches lose defense. He's like, it's a marriage. They need each other. There's no question about that. As far as Jermaine Pratt, yes, I think he'll be back. I think they'll make something happen with him. But I tell you, when you talk about T. Higgins and you talk about Joe Burrows and you talk about Chase, they impact what's going to happen on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Because you have to, as the Bengals, which I hate to be their capologist, they have to prepare for that. It's not like you can say, okay, let's take care of these guys and think 1 year. No, you got to save. You got to put some money in reserves for Joe Paycor, because he's going to own Paycor Stadium when his contract comes due. So you're talking, it could be upwards of $500 million. And then Chase, got to be careful with Chase, Tom. For the people that don't understand his contract, if he makes another All-Pro team, his contract will accelerate, where now his tag will be of the first 5 guys at his position, and that could be, oh my God, that could be astronomical. And you're talking about a 1-year deal. And let's talk about the franchise tag. You talk about T. Higgins or whoever may get that tag. A franchise tag is very demoralizing for a player. You've never seen a player happy being franchised, because they know they are taking risk of millions of dollars. And all you got to do, if you want to see an ugly, nasty, terrible, horrific, poor example of the tag, look at Lamar Jackson, who, most people feel he could have played, at least we 100% know he could have tried to play, but his contract situation probably prohibited him to make or he chose to make a business decision before a playing decision. He could very well be tagged, but he wants his money now. And that's what the NFL, that's the difference between the National Football League opposed to NBA, Major League Baseball, and hockey. The contracts are not guaranteed. They're structured as where you can get as much guarantee as possible, but with the exception of, I think, Kirk Cousins and Deshaun, I can't think of his name up in Cleveland.
Watson, yeah,
Watson. Very few contracts are fully guaranteed, and obviously we know why, which, I don't necessarily agree with, but we understand that because of the risk of injury, it's highly more likely that a player will get hurt and not be able to fulfill it. So teams are reluctant to guarantee. So when you look at constructing the team for next year, it's going to be difficult. And, again, don't expect Joe Burrow to give the Bengals a hometown discount. If he does, he's going to piss the quarterbacks that's coming behind him off so bad, because they rely on quarterbacks like Burrow to push the market forward and up. And if he makes the market settle or even pushes it back, the Players Association would obviously be very, very disappointed in that, as well as the guys that's coming behind him. So going to be tough. And this is great, Tom. We're talking about the byproduct of success.
Yep.
This is what we're talking about. When you win, your players get picked for other teams. They want your players because your players are the one that made you in the AFC Championship game, in the Super Bowl, 1 year ago. So yeah, it's a good problem, but consequently, yeah, you're not going to get the Jamar Chases, as the Buffalo Bills GM said. You're not going to get them in the draft because you're picking at the latter end of the draft now. So it's going to get tougher and tougher. So now that's why the rich don't get richer in the NFL. The rich get poor, and the poor get richer, and that's called parity.
I want to circle back to something you just said there, because we hear a lot of this on our show chat about that hometown discount thing for Joe Burrow. Okay, you, among the many successful things you've done in your career, you spent a time as a player agent for a little while, and you talked about the ramifications that could take place with a players association, or maybe agents of a Justin Herbert quarterback, who would pick anybody out there, right? And what the future contracts may look like. Did you ever have a client, or would you be surprised? Let's put it this way. Would you be surprised if Joe Burrow walked into his agent and said, hey, look, I'm an Ohio born and raised guy. I like this coach. I like the town. I like the feel of the direction of the franchise, where we're going. I'm okay with a hometown, however you define that. I mean, that could be the difference between $420 million or $500 million. Now, $75 million is a lot of money. But when you get to $425 million, I don't know if it's a hell of a lot of money anymore. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'll never know that. But, so when you say you don't expect him to do that, you think there's no chance he does something like that?
There's always a chance, but what I would convey to my client, I would convey this. You got to look at the bigger picture. You must look at the bigger picture. You are affecting thousands of players with this decision. You may think you're going to help them sign 2 players, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, whatever. Fine, dandy, great. However, you are going to affect a whole lot of players that's coming behind you. So the Bengals have the money. If I'm his agent, I'm saying they have the money to pay you. Let them figure it out, and they will figure it out. You're probably not going to see T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow for very long. The window of opportunity is closing. We knew that. We knew from the time they drafted Jamar Chase, and they're all 3 highly successful. And you got Joe Mixon in that. Okay, guys, that's just the way it is. It is not some unspoken truth that if you're good, you're going to get paid. Look at, as an agent, I will give you the best example of if you look at T. Higgins. T. Higgins will make a choice. And I had this with a guy named Stacy Mack, where Stacy was forever going to be the backup to Fred Taylor in Jacksonville. Great running back. But Stacy could have played there with, like, as I explained, it's like an annuity. You're going to be here the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. He was already in his 4th year at the time. Or you can go out there and roll the dice and go to the Houston Texans and become the starter. But with the starter becomes starter responsibilities. Well, in T. Higgins' case, he's going to want to be a number 1 guy. He's going to want to be the guy, not the guy that's held in the second regard. Remember, Tom, T. Higgins arguably could have been in and should have been in the Pro Bowl, but the reason he's not is because he has another guy, number 1, on his team that's going to get more accolades than him just because of the way the PR worked. Okay, you may say fine, I may say fine, the fans may say great, but if you know T. Higgins, he has to be sitting there thinking, I don't want to be a number 2 guy my entire career. Yeah, I want to win. Yeah, I want to win a Super Bowl, but I want to be a number 1 guy. I want to be paid like a number 1 guy. He knows and understands, Tom, that when he's in meetings and they're delivering the game plan, he knows that the other team is focused more on Jamar Chase than him. And that would bother him for a certain period of time. You go all the way back in time where the dinosaurs roamed the land, and myself, Chris Collinsworth, and Eddie Brown was in the same meeting room. Yes, I knew one day I wanted to be a number 1 guy. First, Chris was the number 1 guy. Then Eddie was the number 1 guy. Then I was the number 1 guy. Everyone's going to want that, but we played in a system that didn't allow us to go from team to team to team. It happened in my 7th year of my career, but not in my 4th year career. So I just don't think – I think the Bengals can control certain aspects of it, but players can control certain aspects of it too. And, to the people that, that's out there more wishing that Joe Burrow will take a hometown discount, I just wouldn't count on that.
All right, let me ask you this, though. The flip side of that, okay, the scenario that you just painted, have the Bengals now become a team, a destination team, which maybe you can argue is the first time in the history of the franchise, where, there are other people on the outside looking in that say, okay, well, say tight end, okay, and whether or not they can get the deal done with Hayden Hurst or not, I don't know. But if you're a guy that's been around the league for a while, you're just hoping for your next 1-year contract in some cases, right? Do you think that there will be guys that say, hey, man, I want to go to Cincinnati. I might be getting near the end. I'd like the chance to play on a Super Bowl contending team, which I haven't done before. Maybe I got a taste of it one time, my 2nd year. 7 more years have gone by. Could that be working in the Bengals' favor on the flip side?
No, I don't think so. I think number 1 is the perception that our beautiful Cincinnati, our beautiful city of Cincinnati has. It's not a destination, say, driven place where people say, "Oh, I want to go to Cincinnati," say like Miami, or I want to go to California because of my second career. I'm getting close to it, and I want to be in acting, or I want to do something in New York because of the opportunities in media. You know how that works. I've already made my money. If we're talking about at the latter part of my career, it is terribly blown out of proportion about the championship. People chasing championship rings doesn't happen in football as much as it, say, happens in basketball or baseball, because there's too many variables that can't be controlled. So players don't necessarily look at that. When you're looking at the end of your career, yes, it would be great to play with a Joe Burrow. But let me remind you something, Tom. You look at some absolutely future Hall of Fame quarterbacks, starting with the quarterback that they just played yesterday. Patrick Mahomes, his number one guy, arguably the best wide receiver in the National Football League, left. He left, and he was still in the playoffs. Where did he go? Miami. I was just talking about that. You look at Aaron Rodgers. He doesn't have any receivers. His receiver left. You look at Tom Brady. Tom Brady's never had great receivers in their prime. He had Randy Moss. He had some very good ones, but he's never had these great wide receivers. So when you sum it up and you look at it, general managers, they want. I remember, I got to go back. I remember I was Peerless Price's agent, and we were negotiating. I was negotiating with Scott Paoli for the New England Patriots, and what they offered Peerless was the opportunity to come play with Tom Brady. And okay, great. I'm sitting there going, okay, this is fantastic. All right, send over the numbers. Send over what what you're thinking. And when I got it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like literally. We ended up signing Peerless. 6 years, $36 million, and their offer was like something in the $8 million range. It wasn't even close. So players just don't value that in the NFL like they do in say basketball again, or baseball, or hockey. So the mentality is totally different. Cincinnati has a nucleus of players, very good players, championship caliber players. Championship quarterback, no question about it. They're going to have to do it because at some point in time, the roster is going to explode.
Tim, we can't thank you enough for your time, my friend, and thoughts and prayers with your aunt and your whole family. And we can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time.
I appreciate you having me, as always. The great Thom.
Oh, yeah. Tim McGee, kind enough to join us.
Thank you.
It's so interesting hearing that perspective, from an agent standpoint. I think a lot of us, and believe me, I'm just as guilty as anybody else, I think a lot of us believe, and now look, he's not speaking for every single player, okay? He's not doing that. But he did bring perspective to, a star player. He brought perspective to a young star player in Higgins and what might be going through his mind based on what he went through as a young star player with other guys around you that were looked at as the number one ahead of you, and now you want to be the number one guy, and am I going to take less, and the hometown discount thing? What about being a destination for other players who might want to come win a Super Bowl? I thought that whole exchange was very interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tom. And I just don't put a ton of stock into the hometown discount thing. Like you said, I just don't see it. I know that you can point to some guys that have done it in other sports in years past. I think of one example, David West. He took a huge discount later in his career to go win a ring out there in Golden State. But there are so few and far between examples of guys that will do that to a scale. It's just not really anything that enters into my mind where – these guys know that it's not just, like Tim said, it's not just what you're earning. It's that you're setting the precedent for everybody else. So there's a lot that you got to keep in mind. I just don't – Bro's going to get paid whatever he's going to get paid. And whether he gets paid this offseason or next offseason, the contract negotiation is going to loom over everybody's head to the point where they know that he's going to command a ton of money. So whether he gets paid now or later – you're going to build your team around the fact knowing you're going to pay him, because there's no question that the Bengals are going to pay him, right? They get the naming rights deal for the stadium. they've made it very clear that they are going to pay Joe whatever they need to pay him to keep him here for the long term. He and Zach Taylor will have as many chances to win a Super Bowl here in Cincinnati as they can get. Just the question becomes, what do you do with the pieces around Joe? Tom, I will say it's 11:40 right now. I see Rowdy Every Point with another super chat. That's $7 from Rowdy today.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Rowdy. Rowdy says Tom Brady gave discounts his whole career and made more. I just don't see it happen. I mean, maybe a little less here and there if you can convince Joe that it's because you're getting. Well, hey, if we take a little off the top or take an incentive off here to give to somebody. I just don't see it. I don't see it in today's day and age. I don't see it, but I could be wrong. I'm not an agent. I don't know.
And I'm surprised by some of the people in the chat. And look, you're entitled to your opinion. For all I know, you're going to be right. I don't know. Paul doesn't know. Tim doesn't know what Burrow's thinking is going to be. He strikes us all as the kind of guy that you would think maybe he would consider it. But I don't know that. And people saying, well, Joe's going to do the right thing. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Seriously, what does that mean? The right thing? What? That if he has a chance to make a $500 million that he doesn't do it? Is that the right thing? I don't know what the right thing is. I mean, this is generational, multiple generational wealth here that we're talking about. But look, I always try and put the shoe on the other foot, and some of you may be able to look me right in the eye and say, well, I know one thing. If I could make $45 million instead of $55 million, I would do it for a chance to win a Super Bowl. And if that's the way you feel, then for you, you are right. But I think most people out there, if you want to put it into kind of real monetary fiscal terms, okay, real world, right, where if somebody offered you $80,000 and somebody else offered you $60,000, but they told you if you took the 60 that your 401k was going to be guaranteed to go higher and all those kinds of things, I don't know how many of you would take the 60,000. I don't know. For the betterment of the company, which is basically what Burrow's doing, he's saying for the betterment of the company being the Bengals, Inc., okay, and their chances of winning a Super Bowl, that it makes him doing the right thing, or we would be mad at him for some reason if he wanted to hold a gun to their head down there. I'm not going to blame the guy. Let's take one real quick break before we wrap it up. Is that okay?
Well, I will say on the other side of this break, I have Trace, Reed, and Casey are in the.
All right.
They're calling in. So we'll take a break. And
well,
we'll
why
come
don't
back.
you start with them, and then I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
All right.
Ham and Eggers.
All right. Fellas, let me see if hold on here just a second. Let me make sure we're all good. All right. We can hear you. I can hear you. Go ahead.
We're here.
We're here. All right. It's all yours. Let's get your thoughts here.
I'll let Casey start. I'll let these two start, and then I'll share my thoughts last. Quite clearly, the Chiefs had a really great game plan, attacking the right side. I had too much confidence in Sharping and Adeniji. They combined had 5 sacks and 16 total pressures, which was more than 3/3 or 3/4 of the pressures combined for the game. Joe Burrow was under duress the entire time. I thought he played better than Patrick Mahomes, all circumstances aside, but it just wasn't enough. I thought the officiating was terrible, but I'm not going to use that to use it as an excuse for why the Bengals lost. You take away the officiating, and I think it was still a pretty close game. I thought they had fought really hard. There was just a few plays here and there where the Bengals were just a little off. Jesse Bates just not being able to cover Travis Kelce, being a little too slow on that touchdown. There was the drop pass. At least I thought it was a drop pass from Hayden Hurst. I couldn't quite tell, being told that it wasn't.
I don't think it was.
But regardless, there was just a lot of different plays here and there where the Bengals could have capitalized. They weren't able to capitalize. And I'm not going to let officiating be the reason that gives us an excuse of why the Bengals lost. The Bengals lost because of coaching and just not being able to execute.
Arrowhead's legit. That place is loud.
It was loud.
It was loud. It's big. I had the same thought as you, Paul, that our guy 9 got the ball twice with a tie score in the fourth quarter, and you just, because it has always happened where they've scored and they've won with Joe Burrow when he has that opportunity, that you just almost had overwhelming confidence that they were going to get it done. And both times didn't. And then the punt and the penalty, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there just like, how the hell it happened so quick? You're just looking up at the score and it's like, how the hell did that just happen? We just had the ball 40 seconds ago. But yeah, those are gut punches.
Go ahead, Paulie.
No, Tom's here.
Gentlemen, nice to see you. I see you're hanging out with all the degenerates right now, no doubt, right?
I'd say so. Yeah, I don't know how go right. Yeah, we're here. Last night was tough. It was tough, especially considering the fact that I felt like the Bengals survived the first half. It felt like the first half the Bengals got outplayed. It felt like the game was almost out of hand at a certain few moments in that game where you're like, okay, if Patrick Mahomes scores right here, there's probably a good chance the Bengals aren't going to win this game, and the defense found a way to get a stop every single time. They kicked a field goal. You go into halftime and you feel like at least when I was there, you felt really good. Like you felt like you couldn't really be outmatched as much as you were in the first half, and to look at the scoreboard and be where you're at.
Yep.
In the second half, it almost felt like the opposite, where you had opportunities and then you never seized on those opportunities. And again, the officiating is the easy thing to point to, but I think it's also fair. Like, I think it's reasonable to say that was a big part of that game, was some of the calls that either went for you or didn't go for you. Like, I thought Patrick Mahomes played really, really well. I'll give him credit, but I thought Joe Burrow, if anything, if you live in Cincinnati and you're a Bengals fan and you don't live in Cincinnati regardless, like, Joe Burrow's that guy.
Yeah.
If you give Joe Burrow any time at all, guys, he makes the right play. Like, he just finds a way. That 3rd and 16 play I thought was going to be one of the most defining moments of his career. It's a shame that didn't turn out to be the case, because there was the intentional grounding the very next play, I think, right? Like, the very next play. It's hard to remember when you're at the game and all this stuff, but I don't know, guys. It just felt like.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to, and look, Trace, you guys know, and Casey and Reed, I mean, look, I have been highly critical at times. I've also been highly complimentary at times of Zach Taylor as a play caller. But, to me, it reared its ugly head again yesterday. In the 3rd and 3, with 2.5 to go, 2 timeouts, you need 3 first downs to kick a field goal. Mahomes never gets a ball back, you're going to win the game. I don't understand for the life of me how you're throwing the ball 30 yards down the field on a 3rd and 3, knowing now you're going to turn around and have to punt it. And then, look, you want to blame Darren Simmons, the special teams coordinator, that's fine. But it's just like, a lot of things that go on in the course of a game. The head coach, and maybe it just wasn't executed on the field. I don't know. I didn't see anybody write about it. But almost as inexcusable, no, more inexcusable than the 3rd and 3 call was the punt and a lack of directional punting and at least giving the player on the other team a chance to make a play, which he did. There is no way that guy can be allowed to catch the ball in the air in the middle of the field and have a chance to return the punt. They had 1 timeout left in the game, and there was going to be less than 50 seconds left. You cannot allow that to happen.
Punting's been an issue for Cincinnati, not just for a while. Like, that needs to be addressed and fixed. I'm not saying that I'm not saying all the decisions are being made because they're local guys and they want to keep that local flair and there's like some charismatic stuff to that. But I would tend to believe in the NFL that's not the case. You're going to go get the best guy you can get for the job and leave it at that. It does help when you get, again, I'm just saying how I believe it. I'm not trying to make excuses, Tom, but it does help when you get a block in the back on the left-hand side and you get an open lane to run down the right-hand side of the field. And I'm not trying to say that's the only reason. You need to punt the football high enough to where it's a fair catch or, like you said, directionally punted out of bounds. But you also can't just shove a guy that's streaming down the right side of the field, or left side, depending on how you look at it, and it's exactly where he went. So, the Bengals had a lot of things go wrong in the second half. And two things I want to bring up really fast that I don't know if you guys have brought up yet. This happens in football all the time, and it's unfortunate. But the Bengals drove right down the field during the end of that second half and just ran out of time, right? They ran out of time. It was like first down at the 8-yard line, they ran out of time. You take that play or that situation and you couple it with the fact that the Chiefs, give them credit, they had the audacity to go for it on fourth down, and they threw a touchdown to Travis Kelce in the end zone. Those two things right there, there's a million plays, but those two things right there are so big momentum shifts that's the difference in these games. Yeah.
And the fact that the Bengals have been so good in the red zone all year long, and the two times they got inside the red zone in the first half, both of them were field goals rather than touchdowns. So are you guys having fun? Casey, did you say somebody hit your car intentionally?
Yes. We were pulling out, and by the way, Arrowhead Stadium leaving is a disaster. It is terrible. We were pulling out, and we were in line, and everyone's trying to leave. They're trying to get into this line. Well, this Ford van starts pulling in, and it is literally inching in as close as it can possibly go as we're inching our way forward. And it got so close that it actually hit our car, and he put a paint scratch on the car. It was able to be,
Did he talk to him?
Yeah, we talked to the guy, and the guy blamed us, of course.
Big Chiefs fan.
Big Chiefs guy.
Big Mahomes guy.
Yeah, those are the type of fans that.
If you're a Chiefs guy, you got to be a Mahomes guy.
But regardless, it was able to get buffed out. It wasn't big damage or anything like that. But those are the types of fans that were there. We were also surrounded by good fans. There was actually a Chiefs fan that bought us beer.
All right. Okay.
It goes both ways. It goes both ways. But
how many Bengals fans do you think were in there? Because it was tough to tell because the orange and the red blended together. That you couldn't really tell, but I'm not kidding you. If we were separated by a color more differently, probably a third of that stadium was Bengals fans.
Yeah, people showed up to
probably a third.
Yeah, it's tough. There wasn't really that many times where the Bengals fans could boast, though. It wasn't like there wasn't extended periods of time where Bengals fans were able to really cheer
the whole time. Except for when we tied up.
Felt like
I was a little worried about Reed when I saw the picture of his knuckle. I was a little worried that he had actually gotten into a brawl because I don't think I'd want to be brawling with Reed Mouse.
No.
I don't think so.
So I heard that at the College Basketball Hall of Fame, which we went to in the morning. Have no idea how it happened. We're walking out, and my hand's just bleeding. So I take a picture, and then after tailgating for a few hours, I'm like, I'll have some fun on the internet. And I said, I'm undefeated in fights against Chiefs fans, which isn't a lot. I've never lost a fight against a Chiefs fan, Tom.
I'm not surprised.
It is blown up.
Not surprised one bit. So now you guys, you sit around, you have a 31 beers in a casino all day, probably a bad weather day outside. You don't have to go to the basketball game until tomorrow night. Paul, you and I are here working, by the way.
Hey, where do you want to go to lunch, Tom?
Yeah, is that what's going on here today?
Well, you said it's a bad weather day. I don't know if you know this about Kansas City. They don't have any good weather days. That's why they're so miserable all the time.
Kansas City misery right now.
But yeah, it's probably the game. 31 beers, 30 might be low balling it.
Red or black, Tom?
Going with red all the way. Going with the red.
Okay.
Put it down.
All right.
All right. Boys,
give it a shot.
Thanks for checking in. We'll find out what's happening, I'm sure, again tomorrow with any luck at all.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Well, yeah, we'll see what kind of condition they're in. Because they got a basketball game to go tomorrow night.
Probably bad shape tomorrow.
Well,
Thom, you going out to lunch with Paul?
No, I'm not. No. But Paul has done a great job here, and I'd be a little worried about some of you coming back in and expecting to get your quote unquote job back after an injury, because Paul has been on his game here today. So no guarantees, man.
Honest to goodness truth, Paul. When I turned on the stream today at whatever time it was, right when it was starting, I had about a 95% chance in my brain that there was a good chance that you weren't going to be able to hear anybody or see anybody. The fact that you got this show off the ground and it's ran all day today, for the most part, pretty good. You got people complaining about sound levels. They have no idea what's going on if they're complaining about sound levels. We got bigger fish to fry. But nonetheless, you did a great job. Good job. Good job, guys.
Great job. Men, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Safe travels. Paul, listen, buddy, you're on your game. I can't thank you enough. We were ribbing you last week. Were you going to be able to stand up to the challenge? And you've answered the bell.
Hey, credit to Casey. Casey, he came in here last week, and he gave me a full tutorial. And, usually I sit over here to the right. And he came in here. We ran through it on Thursday. And then I said, you know what, Friday we ran through everything again. And honestly, good for Casey, because Casey's the only one that sat here and done this. Trace has done it twice, once from home and once sitting here. But
yes,
I've been telling Casey, man, if he gets the flu or something, somebody's got to be able to run the show. So, yeah. No, it was good today. I know the audio levels were a little off, but there were about 18 million things going on here that I was trying to balance as well. So hopefully tomorrow we can get into the weeds of the audio, and you all bared with us today.
You were on your game, Paul.
We tried.
On your game. So thank you. Did you have time for a cherry on top or no? No is the answer. Don't worry about it.
Not a great one.
Cherry on top is to thank all of you. Look, Paul and I were talking off the air. And we're wondering, now with the Bengals out, going back to when this show debuted basically at the start of September, it's been all Bengals all the time. And especially the way the season, once a shaky start, rip off 10 in a row, and off they go in the playoffs. They win 2 playoff games, AFC Championship. Now the season is over. Obviously, there's more to talk about in the ensuing days and weeks to come as we get close to the draft and all those kind of things. But football is king. It is king. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the Super Bowl coming up, blah, blah, blah. But our show now needs to start, sort of evolving into what's the next thing. And so, college basketball is going to be front and center for a lot of people, where it's, been, except for Paul, been off in the back burner for, most of the country with all the way the football season has gone, both college and pro. We have 2 weeks off before the Super Bowl. So, we're going to start diving into some of the basketball issues. We're going to start diving into looking ahead to baseball and trying to round up some of the people around the league that be able to, sort of help us get ready for pitchers and catchers reporting. And of course, we'll be following everything that goes on with the Bengals as they have some decisions to make. So, Paul, thank you, my friend.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Thom, and this was fun today. We'll be back tomorrow. I don't know if Seho is going to the game with them or not, or if he's coming back today. He said he was getting in the car. I don't know if that was to meet with the Chatterbox crew or if he's coming back tomorrow. I don't know. It may just be you and me tomorrow and Wednesday as well. But, I made the point to you about, we were talking before we came on the air today about what this show is going to look like without the Bengals, because this show debuted on September 1st, and it hit the ground running with college football and with the NFL and with college and everything else. But I made the point to you, Thom, like with the connections that you have and the experience that you have, you could damn near do the best daily baseball show that there is here out on the market right now with all the connections and everything that you have. And you know that we'll have as much college basketball content as you want to, and the people want to hear, and everything with the connections I have and can bring to the table from college basketball. So, Yeah, we're cruising. We don't have the Bengals anymore, but I'm sure that we'll have James Rapien and some of the others this week to put a full capper on the Bengals season and to wrap up a lot of those things. And, that's just how sports talk works. It morphs into everything else. So we'll be good to go, and we appreciate every single person that has listened all season long. Everybody that's joined in the chat. We got 150 people in here now. We had almost 300 people listening today concurrently, and look, I mean, we started this, Tom. We were back there in October. If we had 50 people in here, it was a good day, and now we're averaging, 200, 250 a day. So it's just how it's evolved, and we appreciate everybody that was along for the ride.
Absolutely, and even watching in Chillicothe, Ohio. Matthew, thank you. All the way out in California. Alexandria says it's time to get ready for FCC Cincinnati.
We can do
We
that.
have that, too.
That, too.
Okay. Thank every one of you. Everett says it kind of feels like the last day of school. It's not the last day of school. We're going to be here tomorrow. Good Lord willing, the day after that. Keep grinding along. Try to do the best we can for you. Give you an option for something at 10 o'clock in the morning if you're able to be with us live, or something later in the day if you're podcasting with us, whatever it might be. We're going to be right here off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Have a great rest of your Monday. Try to keep your spirits up. Try to keep your spirits up. The sun will come out tomorrow. Wasn't that from the musical Annie, I believe? The sun will come out tomorrow. Have a great day.